Hi, Josh.
Hello.
Okay, so Josh is here means that the meeting was not canceled.
What's that?
Well, I thought maybe the meeting was canceled. The call.
No, I don't expect a lot of people, but I want to work on this document anyway. So I figured even if no one shows up, I'd do it. So it's all good. It's just that time of year. It's hard to get anything done.
Yeah, this week, next week, and the first week of January.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, then I'm out next week. We just shut the company down, which makes sense because everyone takes off anyway. So then, but this week, like the last 2 weeks have just been brutal for my
oh yes.
side. It's been so busy.
I think yesterday I was on the call, one after the other one, from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. There was 1 hour gap in there, and 4 p.m. I just shut my PC and just ran out of the house. I said, okay.
Seriously. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what it's been like for the last 2 weeks for me. I've got like so much work to do and none of it's getting done because I think the problem is Christmas lands on the weekend. So all of the field people are like, they've got like that last put, they get the whole week. Like, let's use it. And it's like, oh my goodness, no, stop.
Yeah, so yeah, the last week and then also the first week, a lot of folks that I talked to in Europe, for some reason, Europeans outside of US take that week off because even we have folks in South America. So
Yep. So I'm hopeful it'll be quiet at the end of this week. Although I live in Wisconsin and we're supposed to get like a huge freaking snowstorm
oh, really?
tomorrow night. Yeah. So that's going to be great.
Yeah, they're talking about snow in Philadelphia on Friday. Not snow, it's like ice and sleet and all this stuff.
That's wrong.
And we have my son is coming from Arizona. He's arriving in the morning on Friday, and then sister-in-law arriving by train in the afternoon. So I don't know which one is going to get here first.
Wow. Well, that's going to be quite the change from Arizona to Philadelphia right now. Like,
Oh
holy,
yeah.
should have gone the other way. Like, go see.
No, actually, he used to live there, and he moved to Arizona to be closer to his work because he was doing a remote. He preferred to be at work, and he says he likes the cold now, because he misses that cold weather in Arizona. So
I don't know about that. I feel like when my kids are off and out of the house, like I hope I never see snow again. That's the dream.
but he had the choice between Minnesota or Phoenix,
That's
and he took
that's a
Phoenix.
pretty easy choice, I think.
I think so too.
I do like Minnesota, but the weather is right. Their weather is even worse than my weather because I live in Green Bay, which we get the lake kind of
Mhm.
tempers the climate a bit. And I have some family that lives in Minneapolis, and they just get like feet and feet of snow and horrible cold and just it's terrible.
Yeah, I lived for many years in Buffalo, New York, and it was the same thing. You get up in the morning, you see, oh my goodness, there are 2 feet of snow by your
Oh,
door.
I know.
You have to shovel yourself out.
I know. I've got a coworker lives there and they just got, what was it, like 40 some inches of snow. I don't even know what to do with. I can't imagine that. I mean, and I live in freaking Green Bay. Like, I think we got 24 inches once and it nearly ended me because it was just like, what do you even do with it at that point? It's awful. And man, anyway, all right, let's get this show on the road. I don't expect a lot of people, which is good. So I guess thank you everyone who made it. You're the dedicated few. So let me share my screen. I'm very slow today. I apologize. It's been a week. All right, so I will paste this in the chat, which to find. So sign in, do me a favor. People who are here, there's the introduce yourself in the chat. Do that quick. And then the SBOM everywhere agenda exists. I don't, unless someone has something else to do, I want to hammer this document out and get it close. And I think having fewer people here is much better, because then we get a lot less bike shedding on this stuff. I'll paste it. Oh crap, what have I done? I clicked the wrong thing. I'm going to paste a link to this in the chat. Is that, I think I added a slash. I'll paste it again. All right. And so basically what this boils down to is just hammering out what this group is going to do. For I think most of you have been here in the past. So basically hammering this out, getting it in order, and then we can start using this group to kind of move the SBOM Everywhere project forward. The intent and purpose is we don't want the group to do anything, for anyone who doesn't remember. That sounds silly, but one of the challenges that OpenSSF has is getting working groups to actually do work. And they don't, because we're busy people. And so what we really want to do is use the purse of the OpenSSF to accomplish tasks, not try to acquire help from people who are too busy to do it. So anyway, let's just go through this and see what we're missing and what we have. All right, we got the overview. I'm going to ignore that for now because I think this is easy enough. So we have scope, secure the software. And also I want to add, if any of you, oh, hi, Kate. If any of you have anything to say, just jump in and talk. Don't worry about raising hands or anything like that. I'm not watching the chat. So if someone could speak up, if anyone makes a comment that's relevant. Otherwise, we'll just kind of keep going. All right, so secure software ecosystem, require making production distribution, so S1 easy in consumption. So this part is, we talk about consumption a lot in this group, and when we started the group, there was going to be a focus on creation, and then the group basically said, all we care about is consumption. And so I think this one is important, and we need to do more with it, but I don't know what yet. So if anyone has thoughts or comments, I would value those, because just saying consumption, I think, is meaningless in many instances. But
so I think consumption, what it means, basically be able to ingest them and use the information. What we're trying to do is let people be able to use the information, augment the information, incorporate it in their systems, and do risk management. Right.
All right, hold on, Kate. You just said a lot of stuff, and I'm really slow right now. All right, okay. So they want to use the information, like, what'd you say, ingested into risk management systems? Yeah,
ingested into their own internal risk management systems, or into their own systems, realistically. It could be more than just risk management systems, quite frankly.
Yeah, that seems fair.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I guess though, here's where I think we need to be clear: is our intent to just explain what to do with them, or do we want to like be involved in tooling that can ingest this stuff? That's where I think the line gets fuzzy, is like how
well, we want to make sure that the blockers are removed so that people have solutions out there that they can use themselves to do. So like, there's some open source projects out there, there's some commercial offerings out there. Making that visible, that these options are there, I think is something that I thought we had agreed was in scope for this group already, hence the landscape approach.
Yeah, right. And that's still like the big goal we want to do. And in fact, you and I need to talk at some point, but probably not this week.
Well, later this afternoon's quiet.
Yeah, I do have a little time this afternoon. Anyway, we'll talk later. No, I agree. I think the landscape is the key. So
I think we've got some degree of consensus on the terms. I think they've pretty much, I'm not seeing any major changes happening since in the last couple of weeks on the CISA side. So I think we've got that piece of the taxonomy now in play. And so, getting some of these things starting to categorized and getting people giving us feedback on that, I think is probably a good next step.
Does CISA define consumption in that document?
CISA does not. No, they describe the type of Sbombs, and the consumption of the Sbombs is, what you do with it is
Right.
different depending where you get the information, what's in those Sbombs, right? We've got examples of open source projects out there that are consuming them. Specifically, Daggerboard is out there in open source.
Yeah.
And it consumes it, and then it basically does a matchup to the vulnerabilities. It gives you a dashboard so you can track them for yourself. And so getting more of these things which are taking the Sbomb and ingesting the Sbombs, and then transforming or communicating them. Like I think the DBOM project will be ingesting them in the sense that they're bringing them in and encapsulating them and passing them on.
What is DBOM?
Digital bill of materials.
It's an open source project by which enables producer and consumers to share Sbombs and the related artifacts.
Right.
Who's
Based
doing that?
on agreed policies. And that's what I was going to bring up. So the consumption, I think it needs to be agreed consumption rules, because something that also came up yesterday during the CISA call was, as an integrator, I might consume an SBOM produced by the producer. And then what can I consumption? Does it mean that now I can share it with my downstream customer, which the producer may not want me to share? So it's a little bit grayish area about this consumption and the rules around it. So I don't know whether we want to touch on, say, based on agreed consumption, or that's going too far.
I feel like that's a rat hole, right? I think we should define it later.
Okay.
Because
like I say, I'm just saying that one of the use cases of consumption, I think that's what Mehdi's point was, is to take and pass it on further. So if you're asking for a definition of what consumption is, to me, it's either you're using it or you're passing it on further in some sort of structured fashion.
And you may want to just make a note on it for now. That is exactly what Kay said. The consumption could mean either, which needs to be touched on later.
Yeah. I'm going to write it down, but I'm terrified of just writing that one.
Well, yeah, no, but for it to be everywhere, the whole part of the thing is, the information can pass through the supply chain.
Yeah, right.
And that's the goal.
Well, and I think one of the points that I always bring up when this conversation happens is there's a ton of tooling now to build these things. So you can either give someone an accurate SBOM or they're going to build their own, and who knows what is going to end up in that thing.
Mm-hmm. Tell that to our legal team.
Well, yeah, or quite frankly, so I think what you're just saying is quality. We have an aspect of quality that has to be worked into the scope.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Such that we don't come up with all sorts of variants out there. We have, we're lining up with what is being defined as a couple of reference Sbombs that have some degree of blessing associated with them at this point.
Is CISA defining quality in any meaningful way?
I shall defer that one to Justin, who's on the call, since I haven't been able to be on the call for the last couple of weeks with my travel.
It's something that comes up, pretty often, but there's no task right now that's working on specifically defining it. It's something that's reflected in our notes that whether the term be like completeness for the term that's been thrown around, it's something that needs to be discussed, but we don't have a clear definition set right now.
Right. So I think both Cyclone and SPDX have validation tools out there. I think maybe if at least we can take a practical bottom line that it must any SBOM produced must be able to go through a validation tool and be considered valid for it to be considered a good SBOM.
Quick clarification though, those validations are syntactic, not hey, it got the right answer.
Yeah, no, but they at least have to be syntactic, and they're not right now.
Okay.
Step one.
We've got to crawl.
Got it.
We'll get
Got it.
semantically sophisticated later, David.
Well, but I think I do think that's important because we are going to have a problem with really inaccurate Sbombs. A lot of folks are doing analysis. They're throwing bits in and flipping the digital coins to see what they can figure out. Which is, I mean, if that's what you got to do, that's what you got to do. But I fear that people are going to look at that and say, oh, that's all Sbombs ever could be. So I think we need to keep that clear.
Yeah,
I-
no, we'll see. Yeah, I think we're all in rough
added a
agreement.
note.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, because the verifying is don't fall off the floor, right?
Well,
That's
it's like verifying at this point. I'd say don't fall off the floor is something that someone is a little imprecise a thing. I'd say syntactic at least gate.
yeah.
That's like make sure the syntax is correct and you're following the actual written down syntax.
Yep.
Okay. So I'd be explicit here that it is a syntactic check, if anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. I'm comfortable with that.
Say maybe just say pass a syntactic validation tool. I just want to separate the semantics from the syntax.
Yep. All right. I'll just bold that as the quality gate for the moment. And then I'm gonna rewrite all this. So don't worry. I'm just taking notes basically in the document. Okay. So I think the other piece, and I don't know how much we want to focus on this, but there's the angle of how do we get open source, or not even how do we get, we know one of the goals is we want to see all of open source producing Sbombs for everything they do, right? So what does that mean? Like, do we want to provide some level of guidance? I mean, like the example is the Apache Foundation asked us for guidance, and we haven't really given them any because we don't have any. Like, do we want to create that kind of guidance? Do we just want to tell open source projects you should do this? Do we want to like give them the tool? I don't know. I don't know where to draw this line.
Well, I think what we need to do is understand what's missing. So I think guidance in the set, like I say, everyone's going to want to do things differently in each open source project. They're all special. Okay. Everyone has their own community. Everyone thinks they know everything in their own space. So I think figuring out what we already have a definition of what minimum is, and helping them figure out how they can achieve minimum in one of the recognized formats, as opposed to creating their own, because they're all seeming to want to create their own. I think what we need to help do and make it easy for them. So reference tooling examples and reference tooling and examples to show them. A lot of them will not want to use the reference tooling, so it's reference tooling, libraries, and examples. So show them what's there and then show them how it's being used. And if they don't want to use that, point them to examples so they can look and see what's valid or not.
Now, one challenge we're going to have is I mentioned this on a call. It's been a couple months now, I think, but Brian Fox was there from Sonatype. And like the Java ecosystem kind of does it their own way. And this came up where there's different ecosystems that are kind of trying to do different things. And so I think this is one of the challenges we get in trying to create reference tooling in libraries, because like they're already doing their own thing. And then if we create guidance that is in opposition to what they're doing,
they ignore it.
Right. Well, I mean, obviously, but it also, I think it weakens us and them.
Right.
And so how do we square that circle?
Well, I think finding people who have connections into these communities who also understand this space, and effectively create, get a set of ambassadors who actually understand the format and who can, talk to these people and help put pull requests in and discuss things in their own spaces is probably what's going to be needed. And I think, I think we've already come up with a variant set of lists.
Well, I guess the
Want to prioritize.
the landscape should help with this also, right? If we understand which ecosystems are already doing something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm going to go back to reference tooling.
Yeah.
So isn't that like a live reference tooling or something that can continuously be updated? Because otherwise it's a snapshot, and this whole area is growing so fast. Every morning you get up, there's a new tool, there's a new way. So should it be
Well,
live?
I think having tools that do things in the open is what I meant by reference. So other people can see and copy and paste effectively. That's what the open source projects are going to look like. They're not going. It'll be pretty rare, I think, that the open source projects will take and use some of the commercial tooling that's freely available.
Oh, I see. Okay, so it's only referencing open source tooling.
Yeah, like I say, we're talking about the open source problem. That's what I thought. Right, I was hearing right now.
Yes, we should be completely clear about that.
So just say reference open source tooling on the above line. Just to put open source.
Well, it does sort of say that there. How do we get open source projects to build high quality Sbombs?
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean using open source tools, although many won't use anything else. So probably some clarity would be good.
Yeah, and quite frankly, as the specs change, the tool, the reference tooling needs to change, as do the reference examples.
Definitely. Now, David, I'm going to ask you on this one. Is I think Brian said at some point long ago that the OpenSSF is comfortable being a kingmaker when it comes to like these tools, because obviously, if we create a reference architecture, that's it, right? Those are the tools that win. Is that still true?
I think that is still true. I would say with a caveat that kingmaker, but wise kingmaker. In other words, we shouldn't just roll the dice. I'm hoping that we and you actually, Josh, you actually started down this road, and I think you had the right road. Sit down, what's close, and even if nothing is perfect today, what's a good basis?
What can we rally people? What can we rally people around and build critical mass, because everyone's doing things in a fragmented way?
Right. I mean, there are advantages to doing 100 different things, but if we want to focus resources on one thing, it's helpful to know what the one thing is. By the way, I don't think we'll actually have one thing. I think there'll be a thing for a particular ecosystem, and it might not be the same thing for every ecosystem.
I agree. Well, this harkens back to the CISA documents on like the different types of Sbombs, right? I expect there will not be one tool that generates all of them.
No, there will definitely not. There are different parts in the life cycle and different inputs and outputs. And actually, that's one question I've got for Justin, since I've got him on the call. Is that document now published? Is that document considered final now? Because I couldn't, I was traveling still last week. So I don't know if Justin was on the tooling call.
Let me do some checking on that. I know that was the goal. And so it's not final from the sense of that it still has to go through the CISA chain of approvals, but let me just double check the notes, because I was in North Carolina and Idaho last week.
Oh, so you were traveling too. Okay,
yeah.
Fine.
But I can double check the notes real quick to see.
Yeah, if you could double check that right now, because I'd like to start putting the landscape into that context and the tools context. If it feels like it's pretty unlikely to change right now, but
I'm checking right now. I'll let you know.
Cool.
So we've got, I think the build one is the one that everyone's sort of focusing on in the industry right now, but certainly the deployed one is ones I think we'll be moving to next. But maybe we should sort of choose an order of what we think is the most important from a security perspective and start tackling them from that side.
And the open source perspective, right? Because most open source projects aren't going to care even a little about deploy, because they're developing and distributing, right?
Hmm. Exactly. Although they deploy other projects in their own context,
That's true.
right?
Oh,
They basically they've got configurations that, they've got dependencies that they have to get installed so they can build their own projects.
that's true. Oh my goodness. Every time I have a conversation like this, I feel like it just gets more complicated.
It,
And we're like
It,
7,000
step by
layers of
step, and
complexity already.
let's just tease this Gordian knot, apart thread by thread at this point
y-
in time.
yeah, but before you get overwhelmed, really, it's just, it's turtles all the way down. It's just, it recurses. I mean,
It's
that's
a
the
loop
fundamental
of
challenge.
turtles. It's a
Yeah.
it's a it's a Mobius strip of turtles. That's what we have.
Mm, just to keep it amusing, yes. No argument. Um, but we can get things better bit by
Oh,
bit.
exactly, 100%. And this is the other reason I want to start better just documenting and tracking a lot of this, because it feels like there's so many projects and it's so fragmented and no one knows what anyone else is doing. And it's just no one wins in an environment like that. We all
Yeah.
just suffer.
Well, then, like I say, getting the landscape up there and then getting many people discuss things, I think is.
Yeah, 100%. All right. So I feel like there's enough notes in this scope that I can take this and spin the straw into gold and put together something passable, probably. Let's jump to the mission, because we're also running ourselves out of time. Mission of this work stream: encourage collaboration between SBOM producers, distributors, between all the SBOM people, identify barriers, the usage of SBOM, foster the SBOM ecosystem. Kate, do you have thoughts?
Yeah. Well, let's say rather than foster the SBOM, I think you want to put something in here about the software supply chain and basically fostering SBOM usage through all points in the software supply chain or something like that. Like I say, we've got, mission statements should be crisper. And I think the software supply chain catches a lot of what you've got here.
I agree.
And, the mission of the work stream is to encourage collaboration.
So we really want.
Basically, I think the mission of this work stream is to have high quality SBOM, or okay, my turn to go into verbal mode here. It's basically having high quality SBOMs being automatically being an established part of the software supply chain. Something like that.
All right, sorry, I want to put myself into suggesting mode so I don't completely trample this. All right, what'd you say you want? High quality SBOMs.
High quality SBOMs be an established part of the software supply chain. I would put software supply chain in there.
Yeah, that's I know.
Yeah.
I
But
know.
anyhow.
Okay, so we've got high quality SBOMs, software supply chain, and we also, I think, deferring to other groups is an important part of this, and connecting others is an important part of this. So I feel like these three things are the real goal we want.
I would also say high quality I'm tempted to put the word standardized in front of SBOMs, but or like I say, how do we refer? So let's just leave it as SBOMs. Never mind.
I for now, I think so. I think we can add standardized in the future, but I feel like that's going to create annoying hassles at the moment.
Okay. Maybe shareable. What I'm trying to do is, if someone's creating something, someone else has to be able to ingest it, which is why the software supply chain is going to be looking for that, right? I guess being established, that means it happens. Okay, fine. Yeah, okay. I'm not going to wordsmith any further there. Let other people wordsmith it better.
Yeah, the one thing that's worrying me a little bit, and maybe it doesn't belong here, but in the end, we've got to have, and this is referencing the Kingmaker comment earlier from Josh. We need to get good, high quality SBOM generators for the various ecosystems. Ideally, there be at least an obvious open source software tool for it. And I would be more specific for at least the build SBOMs for an ecosystem. In some sense, you can argue that that's hidden underneath the getting more open source software projects generating SBOMs, because they're not going to do it unless it's easy.
Correct.
Basically,
background.
yeah, basically in support of, I mean, so you could say in support of that, you need to make sure that there's an easy, obvious way to do it for common ecosystems. I'm sorry.
I don't think ecosystems is where I'm raising my voice a little, in the sense that what defines common, I think, is a rat hole we can go down. I just think
common.
I know. I think we should just say open source ecosystems. We shouldn't be trying to classify.
Okay. All right. Oh, I see. Yes. All right. Fair enough. You know, for each ecosystem, there be at least one obvious way to do it. One easy, obvious way to do it. I don't care if there's more than one, but
I think we catch that in the scope. Where with the tooling. So I don't want to specifically say that. I think for the mission to be crisp, like high quality SBOMs, I think captures that.
Well,
an established part of the software. Established part means that the open source roots of all the software supply chain are doing it. To me,
I would agree. Let's not argue this yet. Okay. Let me turn this into a mission statement, and then we can bike shed it.
Okay.
Okay.
Because right. I feel like like this document's also out of order. The mission statement needs to be first, and then we define the scope, and the scope should hopefully clear up any questions that arise upon reading the mission statement. So I'm comfortable with that.
Fair enough. I also don't want to get too bogged down into the wordsmithing. It's just, in the end, what I want to make sure is that we are ensuring we have generator tools that are, you know, push the button, off it goes, super easy. I think we're all in agreement. We just got to put that down, because when people join, I want them to come in and, oh, that's what you're doing, and and not have to re-explain it.
Yeah. Yep. I agree 100%. And even then, oh man, it's gonna be a treat, but that's right. Okay, so the requirements is old, so I don't want to put too much focus on that, but the approach is not. So to reiterate what I've said at the beginning, we don't want to do any work, right? We want to fund work and encourage others to maybe do work. And we could potentially create like a special group or a project beneath this group to do the work. But this group should not do work. Which is weird every time I say
well, that. there's work done to create the funding to do anyhow.
Not, not, I don't,
okay.
Yes.
Yeah, don't say that. Yeah, don't say don't do work. I'm not interested in that kind of
Don't do technical work, we'll say. The technical work should be done by others. We should shepherd the technical. We want to shepherd money to people doing work. Does that make sense?
Okay. I would call that oversight management, something like that. So basically, we're not going to write code in this meeting.
Right.
That's right.
But we are going to basically write specs.
Well, I'm hoping that there's going to be code, and I do think as an output of this activity, there better be a lot of code written. Because if there's no tools on the other end, it doesn't matter.
We've already started with that with the Python tools, and we've got 2-3 trying to get a release out right now.
I know.
Upstream problems, but anyhow.
I'm glad of it. I'm glad. I don't want our clarification subvert the whole point.
Yeah. All right. So, okay, we got the approach, remove friction, SBOM adoption, open tooling makes it easy for anyone. I don't want to just say open tooling. I want to say open source, because that's well defined.
Yep.
That
sounds like a better plan.
And oh man, open, don't get me started. that I feel like that, so that's kind of covered in the scope, but the approach should be more clarified. I think this is where I guess we create.
So I think the approach
Funding.
is, yeah, I think the approach is basically using the landscape to have the survey and understand where the gaps are to focus ourselves on.
Okay, do we have?
Because I've written about, in the last 2 years, I've written about 4 different variants of, here's what we need to tackle, things like that.
Yeah.
Okay, and so I think, getting a agreed upon list of, here's where we've got coverage, here's where we don't, and here are the gaps that we need that we think are worth, recruiting someone to fill with funding.
So one of the, let me write this down first, and then I have something to ask you, Kate.
Sure.
Whatever that's gonna. So you talk about the gaps, and I think there's 2 important gaps, but we don't talk about them correctly. So there's the angle of there's just tooling missing, be it some sort of blind spot, like we can't generate Sbombs for like COBOL or something, we'll say. But then there's also, I think, the angle of like, if we look at the Go Python library, that was a gap in maintainership, right? Like the tooling existed, but we didn't have anyone actually taking care of it. And I feel like a landscape can help identify gaps of like a tool not existing or a feature not existing, but a landscape isn't going to tell us which projects have funding or, just participation or whatever.
Have a stable path for advancement.
You know what? Although landscapes typically don't, if that's one of our primary concerns, there's no reason we can't. The landscape tool, we could add data about, number of has it been contributed to, or released in the last, we can grab the data straight from scorecards and just extract that out. If we think that's a high enough risk for these kinds of projects, and I think that's plausible, we can do that.
One of the things might be, quite frankly, is once we've identified the projects we know about, is to actually take a look at using some of the other OpenSSF initiatives like scorecards and do an assessment.
Yeah, I like that.
And then
in fact,
see if we've got the gaps,
Yeah.
and use that to put some structure around the gap discussions. Other than, to some extent, it'll probably come down to tribal knowledge about the communities. But at least we'll have a framework to start talking about, and then that's useful data for the other projects too, if the tribal knowledge is disagreeing with what they're saying.
Yeah. So Josh, I know that you had already started down that path. I think that basically some acceleration and people to work alongside. Here's some sample code. I mean, we can there's a whole lot of open source projects we can use. Go grab grab some tools. What can we learn? Where are the gaps? Which ones are most likely going to be plausible bases? And your recommendations.
So that's another interesting problem, I think. So there's tooling, right? Yep. There's tooling that needs help. And I think, again, like your comment, scorecard's fine. But then there's also the, I guess, architecting, is that the right term maybe? Of like all this tooling exists, there's a need to use it, and someone needs to glue it all together. And that is not really, so we say that we want this group to do that, right? Up in the up in the scope, we talk about tooling. We say we want to do that, but how do we do that? And I think that's part of the approach here is like here, this is actually in number 3, start with tool sets that will be fastest to release, economically efficient to build, but who is going to do that? Right? Like we can't pay an upstream project to do this necessarily. We can't pay, I don't know.
We can. I mean, there's no law about that. I don't remember any legal
David,
requirement.
It's easy to say we could do it, but we need like some sort of structure to say like this person is going to architect this, and then their work will live in this project. And I also, the most important thing, I do not want to see us like fund something, get it done, and then it rots because no one
Right.
is responsible for it.
Right.
Absolutely true.
I think
And now-
we're all in agreement on that, and that's
Yeah.
part of, as we structure any type of funding contract, there needs to be a provable path, like say, there needs to be the effort at least, even if they don't quite achieve it, towards going to building the community and recruiting other people into it. So they
Yeah.
can't just sort of define it as a fight for themselves and continue.
Yeah.
And that was one of the conditions that we tried to set up. And we're going to be continuing to work on it for the Python side, I think. But we're seeing people start to help us out on Go libraries and things like that. So
Yeah, and the good news is that certainly the U.S. government is really interested in this. I think there's some other folks. Europe is also, the European Commission is floating requiring Sbombs in certain cases as well. So I think that there's even though this is a huge kind of radical change on the industry, there is some stomach in trying to make it happen, and therefore at least some folks willing to put some money in there
Yeah.
if there's a plausible path for it.
the challenge though on those ones, David, is the paths that they're willing to use are like the small business initiative paths, which the open source community doesn't have access to.
Well, we actually do. There's ways to. Okay, now you're talking about U.S. government. There
Yeah,
are ways
like I
to
say,
play
I
this
was
game.
getting all excited when the SBOM initiatives were in. There was the small was it Silicon Valley program, and but when you start going into the details of that program, there's no way that sort of an open source project could easily take advantage of that funding. You had to be a commercial entity.
That's
Right.
To take advantage of the funding, and so there's new mechanisms I think needed here to vector funds beyond what we can do as from the OpenSSF side.
Right.
Trying to take advantage of government
I
funding.
think for some of these things we need to talk to some of the government folks, because I mean the question here is your goal to be a small business funding mechanism? And you know what? If that's your goal, then be honest about it. If the
Right.
goal is to produce results, then that's a different mechanism. But the U.S. government and European governments both have funded quite a bit of open source software development and sustainment in the past. You're absolutely right, Kate, that it can be a struggle, and particular projects shoot themselves in the foot. But I think that there's a hope for at least some of these cases. The particular project you're talking about, that they may be too far down the road. I think they're more interested in being a small business funding than solving the problem. But I could be wrong. I would like to be wrong. In which case, let's talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm going to pull us out of this hole because it's
Thanks.
How's this? We can engage with other folks who have funding and want to solve this problem, and see if we can't be the matchmaker. How's this? We can at least try. We don't know if we'll succeed, but we can try.
And part of that challenge is still going to be, we can fund something, but we can't, like, money can't build community as much as we want it to.
Yeah.
Money can write code, money can't build community, and we need both of those things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Can we pay people to be our friends? Like, that works, right? Like,
Well, we can pay people to be community managers,
oh,
Yeah.
That's true. That's
right?
true.
So we can basically pay. We could hire someone, to basically be a community manager here.
Right. Money doesn't create people who didn't exist, but it does enable people who already were interested to do that, as opposed to something else. So
That's true. That's true. And anyone who's ever stood up like a proper open source project understands that, like, just dealing with the community management stuff is all you end up doing after like 2 months. And
Yeah.
no one wants to do that. So you're like, well, screw this, I'm done. And then your project dies.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that there is a stage where I have, it works sort of, but not quite enough for a large enough community to be willing to use it. And there is always the challenge of getting the software for enough use cases so that people will just grab it and use it. And then you pick up the rest as it gets better and better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the other things that's possibly at a top level, going up a level here, back, is be able to celebrate and make visible the wins effectively. So when things are there and have been accomplished and are available, make that more visible. Because a lot of people don't know about all the stuff that is out there today. But um,
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a really good point, Kate, and I think we suck at that.
I know I suck at it. So
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
we all are,
But
right?
we need to basically have people doing marketing. So some of these elements are, evangelist type of roles, community and evangelist type roles.
Yeah, and like that's a great example of where I think the OpenSSF can add a ton of value, because OpenSSF has some of that. So I want to jump to 4 here. It says incentivize and educate, blah, 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 maintainers. It includes helping open source maintainers implement this, which I think is the obvious second step after the first step. So if we have the tool sets, if we have the guidance, if we have money to give people to implement this stuff, like how do we actually start turning that crank? And is there something we can do to incentivize that?
So I think part of it is sponsoring meetups at some of the shoulder events. So maybe having a hackathon type of deal where all the tool vendors can come, people who are doing tooling can come and collaborate together. And so those who are sort of like maybe using sort of the open source events.
So I know in the government,
OpenSSF and as quite frankly, the open source summits in Vancouver or something this fall, in the spring, let's have a day or two of a hack event. The same way the automotive grade Linux people always have sort of like the meetup and make progress on things, and just have it open for any tool vendor to show up, open source or otherwise, and it make explicit outreach to invite some of the ones when we know there's problems, possibly even help support funding, getting some of the remote people in from their communities into some of this too.
yeah, definitely. And I know the government loves their plug fests, and I think that's kind of the same idea.
Yeah.
IETF loves them also. It's a good thing.
What'd you just say, David? I didn't hear the beginning.
IETF also loves them.
And SPDX loves them as well. That's the only way we've been making progress.
Yeah.
Right. We've been making progress that way for the last 5 or 6 years.
We could argue the semantics of, is a plug fest a hackathon?
Well,
no, we're not talking about that.
We can talk about that, but let's not.
Oh no. So rather than say plug fest, say interop testing. Interoperability testing, okay?
Yeah, which is really what you want. A plug fest is one way to do interop testing, but I agree. The real issue is if you want something to be true, you test it.
Yeah,
that's how it works.
Right, and we're getting close to having the 3.0 spec come out on the SPDX side. That might be a way of gathering people and sort of getting things talking together.
Yeah, 100%. So like, what else is there though? Like I feel like sponsoring meetups is the boring default answer. We might not have, when we maybe can't answer it all today, but like, I feel like, so let's say we've got random open source project. It's mildly successful. Like they're not going to come to an OpenSSF SBOM meetup.
So why don't we just basically, so I think part of it is the magic of having people talking to each other in the same room.
Sure.
Okay. I'm calling that meetups for whatever reason, but in-person get-togethers, whatever. However, what we might want to do is have sponsor a seminar series of people have a tool and they can talk about how to use their tool and in a lightweight fashion, and have a Q&A session. So as projects have tools visible and available and they want to show people how to use them, give them a forum for coming and presenting, throughout the year, like, once type of deal or something like that. And, see if we can get someone to schedule them and they can come and show how to use their tool as a part of the ecosystem.
Okay, I do like that. That's a cool idea. I think we should definitely have some sort of forum, but actually, I think the CNCF does stuff like this, where they have regular
show me
webinars and stuff. Yeah, where people like just show off their cool stuff. But I'm thinking even higher level than this. So let's say I'm going to pick on OpenOffice just because I was running their tools this morning and I was getting grumpy about it. But so OpenOffice, right? Let's say OpenOffice needs an SBOM. how do we incentivize a project like that that is already running thin to dedicate resources or something into making and maintaining SBOM content?
Are we talking OpenOffice or LibreOffice?
Well, LibreOffice, sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, because if your question was about OpenOffice, the answer is give up. They don't maintain it. They've got no
you know what I mean,
vulnerabilities.
though. Pick a
For
product.
LibreOffice,
David, stop it. It's irrelevant. Add any project's name. It doesn't matter. But there's like literally thousands and thousands of projects. They aren't all coming to meetups. They aren't all going to conferences, and we need to incentivize all of them.
I think there's multiple answers to the question. I think we should identify a few and literally work with hand in glove. I would call what we call white glove. Work with a few projects to help them over the starting line, because when nobody else does it, everybody's going to say nobody else does it, and you keep repeating that. And Kate's going to point out that some projects already do, which is true, but I think there's some other kinds of projects that are widely used that don't. LibreOffice might make a very good case because there's a wide variety of folks who bring that in as a desktop application. I don't know what the right list is. Doesn't matter. Pick a few, help them get going. Once you've got a few as examples, now you can point to them and say, look, do X. And they're doing it already, and you can do it too, following exactly what they did. And so
the earlier comment about reference examples.
Yes. Now, I won't guarantee you that everybody will do that once that happens. Okay? But I don't. I think we have to help things start, and then once things have started, more will come. Or at least it's way more likely that more will come. Well, and we'll never get 100%. I think we're going to have to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Kate.
Another thing, like this is in the sort of the meetups type of questions, but rather than saying meetups, like basically just say, sponsoring in-person get-togethers. So we've gotten a SBOM dev room now in FOSDEM for this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really cool.
We basically, Alexios Adolfo and myself are in as sponsors. We got so many submissions in, they took us from a half day up to a full day.
Nice.
Okay, so we were scrambling to get everything agreed to right now, but yeah, so we have a full day worth of content already. There is a pent up place. So this is why I'm sort of saying we need places where people can talk about their stuff and explore issues on these types of areas. There is a pent up demand. There is, there are people wanting to talk about what they've got or explore or say what, we had to turn about a third of the proposals away, okay, because of space.
Wow.
Awesome. So, like I say, sponsoring in-person get-togethers of some form, and quite frankly, collaboration forums where people can talk to each other and explore these things, I think is a way to advance this and get adoption in a lot of these other projects. What we might also want to do is, in the notion of celebrate when people achieve things, is, as projects make things visible or have done things, should we have some sort of way of badging equivalent? I don't want to use the term, I didn't want to use the term badging, but nonetheless, badging is kind of what I'm talking about as, okay. Hey, we speak SBOM. And an
SBOM badge. Yeah, I've been trying to be careful. You're referring to OpenSSF best practices badge. I use that whole phrase because obviously projects have many badges.
Projects have many badges, have many ways of signaling it, but having an easy way for projects to basically, let people know they can generate out SBOMs without having to dig into it too far. Lets them sort of top level it.
SBOM available or something.
Yeah, I mean,
SBOM true.
Yotam, you can just jump in. You don't need to raise your hand. This meeting.
We're pretty flexible. Yeah, please go ahead.
Cool. Sorry, haven't been in one of these in a while. You know, this got me thinking about something along the lines of the Black Hat Arsenal. So having something, you know, if you already have a conference around these issues, whether it's CISA or the Linux Foundation or whatever, and then simply opening up a track for tools for guys to be able to show, present, and people can ask questions similar to what they do in the Black Hat Arsenal. I think that can be nice to raise awareness and get people talking and sharing knowledge.
So the KubeCon had this when in Detroit. They had like a whole community section where people were showing off their tools and stuff like this, which is really cool.
Yep.
But yes,
So
I love that too.
having a focus on. So there's, I think, a couple of events that the LF is already, sponsoring. There's also, and I think OpenSSF is likely to have a role in some of them. I would encourage possibly there's the open source summits, but I also encourage the embedded open source summit as a place.
I would love to talk to these
role.
I talked to some embedded people a couple of weeks ago, and their SBOM needs are very different from the say more traditional SBOM needs. And there's like an enormous amount of overlap, but it's still like there's some weird little stuff. I mean, you've been,
like I say, this is why we've been working with Yocto. So see earlier point about the white glove treatment, we've been working with Yocto, and that's a good inflection point. I'd say like any build chain, compiler tool chain with a linker step has the information necessary here. And outreach into those guys is all good. But getting it so that we've got ways in the embedded side. So maybe maybe we should use this funding here to sponsor a track at these places. And so I think Angela's for the Embedded Open Source Summit, I think it's we can sponsor a track for 20K. And then we basically go forward, we say we want to have a track on tooling for Sbombs. And we say that, or whatever we want to call it here, SBOM everywhere track.
Yeah.
And we do that at EOSS, and we can do it. Maybe Angela might be to doing it for some of the other ones too, but I know she'll do it for EOS.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good idea. Okay, so we're out of time, but this has been a phenomenal hour. I want to thank you all for everything. I'm incredibly grateful. So what I'm going to do now is take everything we have, and I'm going to turn this into like a proper draft document that we can then like nitpick words and wordsmith and do whatever we need to do and kind of get this sorted out and like get moving after that. Like I think we have all the pieces we need. Now we just need to put it together and then like get moving. So awesome.
Yeah,
thank you, everyone.
Just curious if Justin managed to hear back before we break off. Can we make the assumption those 6 types are the ones that are going to stick or not?
Yeah, I'm going to 100% defer to CISA and whatever they say.
I just wanted to see if there's something I can work on all day.
Gotcha.
This is completely and utterly enlightened self-interest here. Because it's my quiet time.
I have messaged both. Alan's on a plane to Texas, but he is technically working. So when he gets off that plane, I'll check in with him and I'll shoot you an email when I find out the status. Yeah. So.
Thanks, Justin. Sorry to me.
Awesome.
Yeah, no problem.
That's right. Crack that whip. Like
Kate and your project management role. What can I say?
I love
it. Anyhow, if you've got some cycles this afternoon and want to talk further.
Yeah, I'll hit you up on Slack, Kate. Because I want to get that proposal for the landscape kind of sorted out. So
now we've also, like I say, there was a lot of SBOM interest in Japan, and there we had some other sort of stuff there that I can do a bit of a recap on too.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. I would love to hear. All right, everyone, have a lovely holiday. I hope I don't see most of you again. So, all right, take care. Bye-bye.
All right, thanks so. Happy holidays.
Yes, thank you.